I should probably say hello first. That feels polite. Hello, I'm Clyde, and if you're new here, I suppose I should explain that I have a habit of ending up in places where not very much happens, and then staying there longer than strictly necessary. You can think of these as my boring little adventures. I keep them all together in a playlist, actually. Every quiet walk, every long wait, every moment where time seems to stretch out and forget what it was doing. They're all there, lined up neatly, in case you ever feel like drifting from one to another without really going anywhere at all. Tonight, I'm somewhere cold. Not dramatically cold. Just the sort of cold that settles into the wood of a building and stays there even when there's a fire going. I'm in a pub, an old one. The kind with low ceilings that make you stand a little straighter without realizing it, and tables that wobble no matter which corner you press down on. There's a fire nearby doing its best. It crackles politely like it doesn't want to interrupt anyone. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But before we go any further, before things slow down properly, if you haven't already, now is a good time to like the video and subscribe to the channel. That way you don't have to remember later when you're already half asleep and your fingers feel too far away to bother with buttons. And if you do enjoy these slow, uneventful journeys, becoming a channel member really does help keep them going. It supports the channel, and as a thank you, members can request a personalized sleepy story, one told by me, at a pace that doesn't rush you anywhere. No sudden excitement, no urgency. Just something gentle to keep you company while the world quiets down. All right, you can settle in now. I'm already seated. The chair creaks a little when I lean back, and the table feels worn smooth as if it's listened to decades of elbows resting on it without complaint. Let me tell you where I am, and who I'm sharing this very slow meal with. We've got plenty of time. By the time I properly notice the cold, I've already been sitting with it for a while. It's not the sharp kind that bites at your fingers. It's older than that, the sort of cold that lives in stone walls and wooden beams, passed along quietly from one winter to the next, like a family habit no one ever bothers to break. The pub smells like damp wool, smoke, and something vaguely stewed that might once have been onions. Possibly still is. The fire is doing its best. It's tucked into a wide hearth, flames licking upward with a steady patience, as if it understands that this is a long evening and there's no point in rushing through it. Every so often, a log shifts and settles with a soft crack, like it's clearing its throat. I'm seated at a heavy table near the fire, though near is relative. The warmth reaches me eventually, but only after thinking it over first. Across from me sits Charles Dickens. He's bundled in layers, collar turned up, scarf looped once and then forgotten halfway through the second loop. His hair looks as though it's been rearranged several times by strong opinions and sudden ideas. He's staring at his plate. Not eating, just staring. The plate holds something that might generously be called a meal. A slab of meat that's cooled into a respectable firmness, a spoonful of potatoes that have given up on being fluffy, and a small pile of cabbage that seems to be waiting for instructions. Dickens picks up his fork. He looks at it. He lowers it again. "I was just thinking," he says, and then stops. He blinks. He looks at the fork again, as though it might remind him what the thought was. "I've lost it," he says mildly. "Whatever it was." "That happens," I tell him. He nods, relieved as if I've confirmed a theory. The pub around us carries on in its quiet way. A man at the bar coughs into his sleeve with commitment. Someone laughs once, abruptly, then stops as if they've remembered where they are. Near my feet, a cat I don't remember seeing arrive has curled itself into a loaf. It opens one eye, judges the situation, and closes it again. This feels like the sort of place Dickens would know well. Mid-19th century England has a talent for cold rooms and long evenings, especially in cities where coal smoke clings to everything and the streets never quite dry. Outside, somewhere beyond the thick door, London is doing what it always does. Carriages rattling, boots on wet stone, factories humming away, turning time into noise and labor into smoke. Inside here, though, time has decided to sit down. Dickens finally takes a bite. He chews thoughtfully. Then he pauses mid-chew. His eyes drift toward the fire. I can almost see a sentence forming, stretching, then wandering off. He swallows. "I'll come back to it," he says. The cat's tail flicks once. I adjust in my chair, the wood creaking in protest, and rest my hands on the table. The grain is smooth from years of use, polished by palms and patience. This is going to be a slow meal, which I think suits us both just fine. The food cools faster than anyone seems concerned about. That feels intentional. Dickens nudges the potatoes with his fork again, as if hoping they'll reorganize themselves into something more inspiring if given enough time. They do not. They remain potatoes, committed to their current form. He sighs, so not unhappily. Just enough to acknowledge the situation. Outside the window behind him, the glass rattles once as a carriage passes. I don't see it, but I hear the sound of iron-rimmed wheels meeting uneven stone, a rhythm London has been practicing for centuries now. The city is deep into the industrial age at this point, thick with smoke and ambition and an impressive amount of soot. Everyone seems to be building something, breaking something, or writing something about both. Inside this pub, though, progress has stalled. A server passes our table carrying 2 bowls of something steaming and fragrant. I catch a hint of thyme, maybe bay leaf, and then it's gone, trailing behind him like an unfinished sentence. The bowls are delivered to another table, where 3 men in heavy coats argue quietly about rail timetables and whether speed is a virtue or merely a nuisance. Dickens watches them for a moment. "I once missed a train," he says suddenly. I look up. "Entirely on purpose," he adds after a pause. "That seems important. I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't hurry." He pokes the cabbage. "Nothing happened," he concludes. We sit with that. Near the hearth, the fire settles again. A spark leaps up briefly, bright and ambitious, before deciding it has done enough for one evening. Somewhere above us, a beam creaks. A long, tired sound, like the building is shifting its weight to get comfortable. The cat by my feet stretches one paw forward, then retracts it, unsatisfied. It turns its head and stares at Dickens with mild curiosity, as though considering whether he might be edible or merely talkative. Dickens notices. He raises one eyebrow. "I don't believe I've been reviewed like that before," he says. The cat does not respond. That feels fair. I take a slow sip of my drink. It's dark, bitter, and warming in a way that creeps up on you rather than announcing itself. The rim of the mug is chipped, smoothed by years of mouths that didn't mind. The pub door opens briefly, letting in a gust of colder air and a man who smells strongly of ink and damp paper. He nods to no one in particular and disappears into a corner booth with a notebook already open, pen hovering as if afraid to miss something important. Dickens watches him too. "I should be working," he says, without urgency. "Are you?" I ask. He considers this carefully. "Not exactly," he admits. The food remains untouched for another long moment. No one seems alarmed, and I find myself thinking that if every meal were this slow, the world might feel less inclined to rush past itself. At some point, a clock somewhere in the building decides to make itself known. It doesn't chime. It doesn't announce the hour with confidence. It simply clicks. Once, then again. A quiet, mechanical sound, like it's reminding itself that it's still doing its job. Dickens tilts his head, listening. "Time sounds tired," he says. I nod. It does. The clock is probably mounted in a back room or above the bar where no one ever quite looks directly at it. Public clocks in places like this aren't meant for accuracy. They're meant for reassurance. Proof that time is still passing, even if no one feels particularly responsible for it at the moment. Victorian London runs on schedules now. Factory whistles, rail departures, printing deadlines. Time has become something you can miss, waste, or sell by the hour. Dickens knows this better than most. His stories move through crowded streets and long workdays, through hunger and hope and the slow grind of ordinary life. Here, though, time seems to have removed its coat and sat down. Dickens finally lifts his fork again. He takes a bite, chews, stops. His eyes drift toward the window, where condensation has fogged the glass into a soft blur. Someone has drawn a half circle through it with a finger, perhaps without meaning to. The mark catches the lamplight like a crescent moon. "I was going to say something about childhood," he says. He frowns slightly. "Or soup. Those feel related somehow." I glance around the room. A couple near the door share a loaf of bread, tearing it unevenly, passing pieces back and forth without counting. A dog, large, gray, and shaped like it was assembled by committee, lies sprawled near their feet, snoring softly. Each breath whistles a little, as though it has opinions about the air. The bartender polishes the same glass he's been polishing for a while now. He rotates it slowly, inspecting it from different angles, clearly in no rush to declare it finished. Behind him, shelves hold bottles in mismatched rows, labels faded, some handwritten, some simply implied. Dickens clears his throat. "I once tried to describe a room like this," he says. "Spent 3 pages on the feeling of it." "And?" I ask. "I cut it down to 1 paragraph," he says. No one complained. He takes another bite, this time committing to it. Progress. The cat has moved. It's now curled beneath Dickens' chair, having apparently decided he generates sufficient ambient warmth. Dickens notices when his boot bumps gently into something soft. He freezes. Looks down. "Well," he says quietly. "That's new." The cat opens one eye. They regard each other. Neither moves. The fire crackles again, sending a brief wave of warmth across the room. It reaches my knees this time, which feels like a small victory. I lean back, listening to the layers of sound. Breathing, fire, distant voices, the patient click of that unseen clock. This meal is still going nowhere, and somehow that feels like exactly where it's supposed to be. The pub settles into itself the way an old coat does when you hang it up properly. No one announces it. It just happens. A draft slips under the door and curls around my ankles, then gives up and retreats. Someone stirs their drink too long and clinks the spoon against the side of the mug without apologizing. The sound echoes briefly, then disappears into the wood and smoke. Dickens has paused again, fork hovering above his plate like it's waiting for permission. I watch a bead of gravy make a determined journey toward the edge of the plate. It stops just short, reconsidering its choices. Gravity has always been persuasive, but tonight it seems willing to negotiate. "You know," Dickens says slowly, "there's a particular silence that only exists in public places." I wait. He appreciates that. "It's not the same as being alone," he continues. "It's shared. Everyone agrees not to fill it too quickly." He gestures vaguely with the fork. A bit of cabbage slips off and lands back on the plate with a soft, damp sound that feels final. That silence sits with us for a while. It's the kind that lets your thoughts wander without asking them to arrive anywhere useful. Mine drift to the streets outside, gas lamps lining the roads now, casting long, uneven shadows. London smells like coal and wet stone and ambition. Children run errands late into the evening. Printers' presses thump away somewhere, turning words into weight. Inside here, none of that matters. A man at a nearby table unfolds a newspaper with exaggerated care, smoothing each crease as if it might resist. The headline mentions Parliament. The paper itself looks tired already, corners curling, ink smudged from too many hands. Dickens glances at it. I should probably be offended by something in there, he says. Are you? I ask. Not at the moment, he says. I'll save it for tomorrow. The cat shifts under his chair, stretching one paw, then the other. Dickens freezes again, mid-thought. Oh, still there, he murmurs. The cat purrs. That seems to settle things. The fire sighs and settles deeper into its embers. The light in the room grows softer, more amber, like everything has decided to blur slightly at the edges. Even faces look gentler this way. I take another slow sip from my mug. It's warmer now than before, or maybe my hands have just stopped arguing with the cold. Dickens finally finishes half his plate. He looks mildly surprised. Well, he says, look at that. He doesn't rush to finish the rest. Neither do I. Time, wherever it's keeping itself, continues clicking quietly along, patient enough to wait for us. The longer we sit, the more the pub begins to feel like it's holding its breath with us. Not tensely, just quietly, as if it's listening. Someone near the bar hums a tune without realizing it. The melody never quite settles on a recognizable shape. It wanders up, dips down, then fades out entirely, apparently satisfied with having existed at all. Dickens notices it halfway through. He tilts his head again. He does that often, and taps the side of his plate once with the edge of his fork. I think that song is about soup, he says. I consider this. It could be, I agree. He seems pleased that I didn't question it. The hum doesn't return, but the idea of it lingers, floating somewhere above the tables like a thought that refuses to sit down. In places like this, entertainment doesn't demand attention. It arrives softly, stays briefly, and leaves without asking to be remembered. Victorian pubs are good at that. They're built for waiting, waiting out the cold, waiting out the workday, waiting for the next train, the next paycheck, the next idea worth writing down. Not everyone here has words for what they're waiting for, but the habit of it is shared. Dickens takes another bite. He chews longer this time. His eyes soften, unfocused, as if he's drifted a few steps down a street only he can see. I imagine gas lamps flickering, a row of houses leaning slightly toward one another, windows glowing with separate, private evenings. I once tried to eat quickly, he says suddenly. I look up. It felt dishonest, he adds. That feels like the sort of statement that doesn't require elaboration. The cat beneath his chair has rolled onto its back now, exposing its stomach to the world in a display of absolute trust or absolute indifference. One paw twitches, responding to something happening entirely in its own mind. The bartender finally sets the polished glass down. He reaches for another and begins again, apparently content to repeat the process indefinitely. I shift in my seat, wood creaking again, and feel the warmth of the fire finally settled fully into my legs. It's taken its time getting there, but that seems appropriate. Dickens sighs, a good sigh this time, and sets his fork down. Best meal I've had all day, he says. There's still food on the plate. That doesn't matter. Outside, the city continues its steady churn. Inside, the evening stretches itself comfortably, unconcerned with productivity. And I find myself thinking that this unremarkable moment is exactly the sort that deserves to be remembered slowly. After a while, the pub begins to sound like it's breathing. Not loudly, just enough to notice if you stop trying to listen for anything else. The fire exhales a soft rush of air as a log shifts again. Someone near the bar clears their throat, then thinks better of saying whatever they were about to say. A chair scrapes once, carefully, as if apologizing to the floor. Dickens stares at his plate again, not critically this time, more fondly. "I think meals remember us," he says. I glance at the plate. They remember how long we sat with them, whether we rushed, whether we argued, whether we let them cool in peace. That feels like something he's been thinking for a while. Victorian England is full of meals eaten quickly. Hurried breakfasts before factory shifts, dinners gulped down by candlelight, lunches taken standing up because there isn't time to sit. Food is fuel more often than ceremony. Even here, in a pub meant for lingering, most people still eat like the next obligation is watching them. Not us. A man in a heavy coat stands near the door, patting his pockets methodically. He finds what he's looking for on the third attempt, a small bundle of papers tied with string. He unties it, reties it, then leaves without ever opening it. I wonder how many thoughts stay bundled up like that, waiting for a better evening. Dickens finally pushes his plate slightly away. "I don't think I'm finished," he says. "I'm just resting between bites." The cat agrees, stretching in solidarity. Outside, a distant whistle cuts through the air. A train, most likely. The railways have been stitching England together for decades now, pulling towns closer, speeding lives up whether they're ready or not. Somewhere, people are counting minutes. Somewhere else, they're missing connections. In here, the sound fades quickly. It doesn't belong to us. I watch the oil lamp on the table flicker. The flame leans, straightens, leans again, like it's undecided about its posture. Shadows ripple across Dickens' face, softening his features, making him look less like a man who writes about entire cities and more like someone who just wants to sit quietly a little longer. He notices me watching. "You look comfortable," he says. "I am," I reply. He nods, satisfied with that answer. We sit like that for a while. Two people, one unfinished meal, a room full of ordinary sounds doing their best not to become memorable. And the longer nothing happens, the more perfect it feels. At some point, the food stops being the most important thing on the table. It doesn't disappear. It just waits. Dickens has folded his hands now, fingers resting together as if they're holding a thought in place so it doesn't wander off. His plate sits between us like a paused conversation, half finished and perfectly content to remain that way. "I think," he says slowly, "that meals are better when they're allowed to forget why they started." I give that a moment. "Usually hunger," I offer. "Yes," he says. "That's the excuse. But after that, something else takes over." The oil lamp flickers again, throwing a brief, exaggerated shadow of his profile against the wall. For a second, it looks like he's listening to himself speak from somewhere else in the room. Behind us, someone laughs. Softly this time, as though remembering something mildly amusing rather than genuinely funny. The sound drifts upward and disappears into the rafters, where it will likely stay until morning. Victorian London is full of conversations like that. Half-finished stories, pauses mistaken for endings, people stopping mid-thought because the room feels more important than whatever they were about to say. Outside, night has fully settled in now. The window reflects the inside of the pub back at itself. Tables doubled, lamps repeated, faces floating faintly in the glass. Rain has begun tapping against it, not urgently, just enough to announce its presence and then mind its own business. The cat shifts again, tail flicking once before going still. It has chosen its position carefully, equidistant from warmth and inconvenience. Dickens notices the rain. That will make the streets shine, he says. He doesn't elaborate. I imagine gas lamps reflected in puddles, carriage wheels slicing through thin sheets of water, footsteps slowed just a little by slick stone. Somewhere, someone will arrive late and apologize unnecessarily. In here, the rain only makes the room feel smaller, safer. Dickens reaches for his fork again, not to eat, just to move it slightly, adjusting the angle as if symmetry matters now. He nods to himself, satisfied. I'll finish that later, he says. I believe him. We sit quietly, listening to the fire and the rain and the gentle weight of nothing needing to happen next. And I realize that this careful, unhurried nothing is the real reason I stay in places like this as long as I do. The rain settles into a rhythm that feels practiced. Not hurried, not dramatic, just steady enough to remind the windows they still exist. Each drop taps the glass with a soft insistence, joining the other sounds that have made themselves comfortable here. The fire's low murmur, the occasional clink of pottery, the quiet breathing of people who have nothing urgent to attend to. Dickens shifts in his chair, Wood complaining briefly before agreeing to the change. He looks around the room as if he's seeing it all slightly differently now, like the pub has rearranged itself while he wasn't paying attention. I think places like this collect thoughts, he says. I wait. They gather the ones people don't finish, the ones that don't quite fit anywhere else. That makes sense. Victorian London produces an endless supply of unfinished thoughts. Ideas scribbled in margins, worries folded into pockets, hopes postponed until spring or payday or the next better year. Not all of them make it into books or speeches. Some of them just linger. This pub feels full of them. A man near the window folds his newspaper with care and tucks it under his arm, even though he doesn't stand up. He unfolds it again a moment later, rereads the same paragraph, and sighs as if the words haven't changed enough to satisfy him. The cat stirs beneath the table, lifting its head briefly before deciding consciousness is overrated. It resettles with a soft huff and presses its nose into its own tail. Dickens reaches for his mug now instead of his fork. He takes a small sip, pauses, then another. The drink has cooled, but he doesn't seem to mind. Some things are better when they're allowed to lose their edge. I once tried to write in a hurry, he says. That sounds unlikely. It didn't go well, he admits. The words new. I smile at that. The oil lamp flickers again, flame dipping low before recovering. Shadows stretch and shrink along the walls, playing out a quiet drama no one is watching closely enough to applaud. Outside, the rain thickens just slightly, enough to blur the reflections in the street. Somewhere nearby, a door opens and closes. Footsteps hurry for a few seconds, then fade. Inside, no one moves. We sit with the table between us, the half-eaten meal. The lamp, the gentle accumulation of minutes that don't need to be accounted for. And I realize that if time has any intention of pushing us forward tonight, it's being remarkably polite about it. The pub has reached that part of the night where even the quiet feels settled. Not tentative anymore. Not waiting to see what comes next. It's the kind of quiet that knows it will be staying for a while. Dickens sets his mug down carefully, aligning it with the edge of the table as though straight lines are suddenly important. He studies the surface of the wood again, tracing a shallow scratch with his eyes. Someone before us must have carved it absent-mindedly. A knife slipping, a thought drifting elsewhere. There are marks like that everywhere, he says. Little accidents that stay longer than intentions. Victorian London is full of them. Brickwork repaired unevenly. Street names painted over older ones. Laws amended, then amended again. Whole neighborhoods reshaped by rail lines and factories. Progress leaving its fingerprints whether anyone asked for them or not. Here, though, the marks feel gentler. A woman near the door wraps her shawl tighter around her shoulders and stands, then hesitates. She looks back at her table, at her empty cup, at the fire. She sits down again without explanation. No one questions it. The cat lifts its head as she moves, eyes half open, then closes them again when nothing interesting follows. It has mastered the art of responding only when absolutely necessary. Dickens nudges his plate closer now. Not to eat, just to keep it company. I used to think moments needed to be filled, he says quietly. Now I think they just need to be allowed. The rain outside has softened. What was once a steady tapping has become a scattered whisper, droplets sliding lazily down the glass instead of announcing themselves. Reflections blur and reform, gas lamps stretching into golden streaks. I lean back slightly, feeling the chair support me without complaint. My drink is nearly gone, but I don't feel any urgency to replace it. The warmth has settled in properly now, not just from the fire, but from the room itself. Dickens closes his eyes for a moment. Not sleeping, just resting them. When he opens them again, he looks lighter somehow, as though he's set something down without needing to say what it was. This, he says, gesturing vaguely at the table, the room, the hour, is enough for tonight. I nod. And we sit there, sharing the quiet, letting the night finish its slow work around us. Unhurried, unremarkable, and exactly right. Eventually, even the pub seems surprised by how long we've been sitting. Not offended, just mildly impressed. The fire has burned itself down to a low, steady glow. Less flame now, more memory of heat. Someone adds a log without ceremony, nudging it into place like they've done this 1,000 times and expect to do it 1,000 more. Dickens watches the sparks rise and disappear. They never stay, he says, even the bright ones. That feels like something he knows firsthand. Victorian life doesn't offer much stillness. Writers are expected to produce, to comment, to notice everything loudly. Readers wait. Publishers wait. The world waits, tapping its foot politely but firmly. Even now, somewhere across the city, a printer is likely hunched over fresh pages, ink staining fingers that will be scrubbed raw by morning. Here, none of that reaches us. A server passes by and pauses, looking at Dickens' plate with the same respectful expression you'd give an object that has served its purpose well. He doesn't ask if we want more food. He asks if we're comfortable. We nod. He leaves us to it. The cat shifts again, finally deciding to sit upright for a moment. It blinks slowly, surveys the room, and then, satisfied nothing requires its attention, curls back down into itself like a comma at the end of a long sentence. Dickens exhales, long and quiet. I think, he says, that if more people allowed themselves evenings like this, there would be fewer arguments. I imagine that for a moment. Meetings replaced with silence, deadlines softened by lamplight, urgency politely excused from the room. It's a nice thought. The rain outside has nearly stopped now. What remains is the occasional drip from an overworked gutter, each drop falling with the patience of someone in no hurry to arrive. Dickens finally pushes his chair back just an inch. Not to stand, just to stretch. I don't think I'll ever finish that plate, he says. That's all right, I tell him. He smiles. Small, tired, genuine. We sit there a little longer, watching the room slowly empty itself of sound, feeling the night settle deeper into its own quiet. Nothing else needs to happen. And for once, nothing else does. The pub has thinned out without announcing it. Not emptied, just softened. Chairs that were once occupied now sit slightly askew, as if surprised to be alone. A table near the wall holds 2 abandoned mugs, their foam rings slowly fading into the wood like memories deciding whether they're worth keeping. Dickens notices this before I do. He always seems to notice things just after they've already happened. It's easier to leave quietly, he says. Places like this prefer it. The fire has settled again, flames lower now, but steady. It doesn't crackle as much anymore. It hums faintly like it's content with the work it's done so far. Someone opens the door briefly, letting in a final breath of cold air and wet stone. The smell of rain follows them inside for a moment, then slips away when the door closes again. Dickens watches the door. I think evenings have a natural ending, he says. They don't need to be pushed toward it. That feels right. Victorian nights often end abruptly. Bells, whistles, last calls shouted louder than necessary. But this one seems determined to dissolve instead. To thin out gradually until it becomes something else entirely. The cat stretches again, fully this time. Its back arches, tail lifts, then it resettles with a soft sound of resignation. It has no intention of leaving yet. Neither do we. Dickens picks up his fork once more, nudges a piece of food toward another, then stops. He sets the fork down gently, as though not to wake the plate. I think the rest belongs to tomorrow, he says. Tomorrow can have it. I lean back and let my shoulders relax fully for the first time. The chair holds. The table remains solid. The lamp flickers without urgency. Outside, the last of the rain drips from the eaves in slow, deliberate drops. Somewhere nearby, a clock ticks. Not loudly, not insistently. Just enough to remind the world it hasn't forgotten how to move. But for now, we don't. And in this small pocket of warmth and quiet, with nothing left to finish and nowhere left to rush to, the night feels complete exactly as it is. The pub feels smaller now, not cramped, just more contained, as if the walls have leaned in a little, deciding this is as much space as anyone needs for the remainder of the night. Dickens shifts again, rolling his shoulders once, carefully, like a man reminding himself he still occupies a body. He looks tired in the gentle way, not worn down, but pleasantly used up, like a candle that has done its job and doesn't resent the shortening wick. I forget, he says quietly, how rare it is to sit without being asked for something. I don't answer right away. Outside, a final carriage passes, slower than the others, wheels damp and restrained. The sound fades quickly, swallowed by distance and stone. London is still there. Factories, presses, schedules, expectations. But it feels far away now, almost theoretical. The lamp between us flickers again, lower this time. The flame hesitates, then steadies, apparently deciding it has enough oil to see the night through. Dickens glances at his plate one last time. I suppose I should be disappointed I didn't finish, he says. He waits. I'm not, he adds. That feels like progress. The cat beneath the table rises at last, stretching fully, tail high, back arched, then steps carefully between chair legs and boots as it makes its way toward the hearth. It settles there instead, closer to the embers now, having recalculated its priorities. I realize my own drink has been empty for a while. I hadn't noticed. The pub is nearly silent now, save for the fire and the lamp and the slow, shared breathing of a place winding itself down. No one rushes us. No one reminds us of the hour. Dickens leans back slightly and closes his eyes again. Not sleeping, just resting inside the moment while it's still intact. This was a good evening, he says. It doesn't sound like a conclusion. It sounds like a truth. And I sit there with him, letting the warmth linger, knowing that whatever comes next will arrive gently, whether we're ready or not. We sit a little longer than necessary. That feels important. The pub has fully settled into its end-of-night self now. The fire glows low and steady, more suggestion than flame. The lamp between us flickers gently, as if aware that it won't be needed much longer, but willing to keep going all the same. Dickens opens his eyes again and looks around the room one last time. Not searching, just noticing. This is the part people forget, he says quietly. The part after everything is finished, but before anyone leaves. I nod. Outside, London continues doing what it always does, even at night. Somewhere, a printer finishes a page. Somewhere else, someone turns a key in a lock and decides to walk the long way home. The city breathes, patient and unaware of us. Inside, nothing demands our attention. Dickens pushes his chair back just enough to stand, but doesn't yet. He rests his hands on the edge of the table, feeling the grooves worn there by other evenings, other conversations that ended without ceremony. I'm glad we didn't hurry, he says. So am I tell him. He straightens his coat, pauses, then smiles. Not the kind meant for an audience, but the small, private kind you keep for yourself. Well, he says, I think that's enough for one night. It feels like goodbye, but not the heavy kind. The cat lifts its head again as we move, blinks slowly and decides this change is acceptable. It resettles near the hearth, unconcerned with departures. I take one last look at the table, the unfinished plate, the empty mug, the lamp still glowing, and let the moment settle fully before I disturb it. Then, quietly, I reach into my pocket. The stone rests easily in my palm. It's smooth, familiar. When it begins to glow, the light is gentle, never rushed. The hum that follows is low and patient, like it's been waiting politely for the right moment. The pub softens at the edges. The warmth lingers. The sounds fade, fire, lamp, breathing, until they are no longer asking to be noticed. I take a slow breath. And another. If you're still awake, you can let your eyes close now. You don't need to follow me any farther tonight. I'll be off on another boring little journey soon enough. Another quiet place. Another unremarkable evening that doesn't ask much of anyone. You can find all of my travels waiting for you in the playlist whenever you feel like wandering again. They'll be there. They always are.